The Ballad of Tom Dooley by Sharyn McCrumb. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. The folk song, made famous by the Kingston Trio, recounts a tragedy in the North Carolina mountains after the Civil War. Laura Foster, a simple country girl, was murdered, and her lover, Tom Dooley, was hanged for the crime. The sensational elements in the case attracted national attention. A man and his beautiful married lover accused of murdering the other woman, the former governor of North Carolina spearheading the defense, and a noble gesture from the prisoner on the eve of his execution, saving the woman he really loved. A few days after I settled in, when the sky had cleared to a watery blue and the wind died down a notch, I saw my cousin Ann as if she were somebody else altogether. I was outside about to wring the neck of a chicken for our dinner when Ann strode into the hen yard all cloaked and bonneted as if she meant to be outdoors for more than her usual run to the privy. James is doing a spell of shoemaking now, so he can tend the fire. We can go off visiting this afternoon since the weather has broke. I wondered who she aimed to call on, since nary soul had come to the cabin in all the days I had been there. But before I could ask who she intended to grace with her presence, she froze in her tracks, looking past me, and her whole face lit up like firelight. She was taking no more notice of me at all, so I turned to see what had left her dumbstruck, thinking maybe she had caught sight of a rainbow up over the hills. I was still looking for that rainbow a few seconds later when it finally hit me that the wonder she had beheld wasn't nothing but a scrawny, dark-haired fella in an old brown coat coming toward us out of the pine woods. In a couple of heartbeats, she had collected her wits about her again, and I don't believe the young man even noticed it. But I never forgot that look, for it set me wishing then that I could want anything in the world as bad as my cousin Ann must have wanted this blue-eyed boy. As he got closer, I could see that he was handsome enough, about the same age as we were, and he wasn't lame or missing an arm or missing an eye. The war had been over for a year now, and them that was coming home had already made it back, but the fighting had left its mark on most of them one way or another. If this boy had been in the war, he looked as if the last 4 years had touched him but lightly, and I wondered how that could be, for I did not think he had the makings of an officer. Nothing about his clothes or his countenance made me think that he came from the gentry. I had known officers in my time, and there was an air of command about them that this fellow didn't have. There wasn't much meat on him, but that was true of everybody in these lean times, and in his case it just sharpened his cheekbones and made him look taller than he was. I glanced past him at the clabbered sky above the pine woods. Today his eyes truly were bluer than the sky. He was nice enough to look at, I'll give him that, but I didn't see anything about him that should set a woman's face alight the way Ann's did when she caught sight of him. He wasn't a rich man, if his boots and his hands were anything to go by. He looked like an ordinary dirt farmer, fortunate in his looks at 20, but another decade or so of drink and hard work would put paid to that, as it would to Ann's. I told myself that there is some satisfaction in having less to lose. Before he got within a civil speaking distance of us, Ann had pushed past me and run out of the hen yard, flinging herself in his arms and calling out, "Tom!" So that's the way of it, I thought, following her out. He held her close for a minute before he caught sight of me, and then he let her go, still watching me warily, the way a stray dog does, to see if you're going to shy rocks at him. We neither one of us smiled. I don't like anybody unless they give me a reason to, which mostly they don't. Maybe he was the same. After a minute or two of stroking his cheek with her hand and rubbing his hair, She grabbed his hand and led him back to where I was standing. "This here's my cousin Pauline," she told him. "She has come to work on the farm a spell while she's getting treated by Dr. Carter." He nodded at me, but didn't smile, so for spite I said, "Would you be Anne's brother, sir?" They smiled at one another then, but they could not fault me for asking, for Anne did have a brother named Tom, but I'll bet she was never half so glad to see him as she was to see this fellow. Anne said, "He's Tom Dooley, Pauline. Lives with his mama about a half a mile from my mama's place on Reedy Branch." "You have the look of a soldier," I said. Not because it was true, but because men seemed to take that as a compliment. He nodded. "Well, the 42nd North Carolina tried hard enough to make me one." Anne had linked arms with him, and she was leaning against him now, looking as proud as if he had won the war by himself instead of losing it in company with 100,000 or so other ragged souls. "Tom was at Petersburg and at Cold Harbor," she said. "I went in as a company drummer, but by the end of it, the army needed fighters more than drummers." Anne hugged him closer to her. "And he got took prisoner at Kinston near the end and finished up in a prison camp up in Maryland. Took him nigh on 2 months to make it home, and with me out here watching the road for him every day and worrying if he was safe until my tears turned the dust on my cheeks to mud." Tom Dooley turned to look at the empty road, and it was a moment or two before he spoke again. "I was lucky, I reckon. I lived through the Yankee prison camp, and I finally did get home. That's more than John and Lenny did." Anne nodded. "Strange to think of it that way, Tom, them being dead and gone. And you were the youngest. I know your mother was near as thankful to have you back as I was." I just kept looking at the pair of them, neither one seeming to remember that I was standing right beside them. I kept quiet because there wasn't much I could think of to say, except to congratulate this fellow for outliving his brothers, which didn't seem fitting. Besides, I was more interested in how the land lay between him and Cousin Anne, for I had not seen her sparkle with warmth of joy at all until this rebel boy walked out of the woods. "How long have you been back?" I said, thinking he must have arrived yesterday from the way Anne was carrying on. "It'll be a year midsummer," said Anne, but her smile faded as she looked at me, for my speaking up had reminded her that I was watching them. She narrowed her eyes and said, "Well, this standing around isn't getting your chores done, Pauline. When you see to that hen, there's washing to be done." She looked up at Tom. "James is in the house cobbling right now. Let's you and I go talk in the barn where it's warmer." I went back into the hen yard, watching them hurry arm in arm toward the barn, and I was thinking, it'll be warm enough wherever the two of you fetch up. But it was all the same to me who Anne chose to carry on with. I couldn't see anything special about this boy worth making such a fuss over. But a minute or two later, as I wrung that chicken's neck, I found myself thinking of the two of them entwined together in the hayloft, and when the wind eased up a bit, I fancied I could hear laughter and soft voices.